Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. With us on the podcast today is Julie Murphy. Julie's the owner of the Designer Draperies of Boston, and she began her workroom as a home-based workroom in 2006, and then in 2014 bought the company and then merged them. And so on the podcast today, we're going to talk about how she's been able to triple the business in size and in revenue over these last few years. And we're also going to follow along with her journey, the highs and the lows of buying and selling a company. And so I invite you to enjoy the podcast. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Michele. So happy to be here.
Thanks. I'm excited to talk to you. I was trying to remember how long ago we met. I want to say it was around 2010, 11, 12, somewhere. It was early because it was when I still was working for CHF Academy and going around teaching the pricing classes and speaking at the WCAA events. Do you remember when?
I want to say you're pretty accurate. I officially started the business in 2006, but didn't know this world probably for 2 to 3 years after that. And then probably didn't have the courage to attend an event until about 2010. So that sounds probably right.
Yeah, I just remember it being somewhere in that 2010, 2012 timeframe. And I think we met, well, the time that I remember being the most close to having conversation with you was at Liz's house.
Correct.
Liz is a workroom owner, and she had opened up her home and invited, tons of window treatment owners into her home. And I went in and taught the pricing without emotion course. And I remember sitting around the dining room table having big conversations about business. And that was, I remember all the way back, that was where I remember thinking, she's a smart cookie. So I'm curious if we both remember that. Do you think at that time, and you had kids at home, kids in school, so you still had a very active home at that point. Your kids are a little older like mine are now, and college and out of college. But do you think at that point in time, let's say it was 2010, 2012, do you think you would have envisioned the business you have today?
No, definitely not. Just to give you a little background, I had been an occupational therapist for about 10 years before I officially started my home-based workroom, because I didn't even know that it existed. And you're right with my children's age. My youngest, when I started in 2006, was 1. And so fast forward to when I purchased Designer Draperies of Boston in 2014, really the catalyst was my home was just the work. There was too much work. We had done a little bit of an expansion. I couldn't fit. And I was just looking to expand the space, never envisioning staff or any of that. So no, the answer to that question is no.
So let's go back to the beginning for a minute, because I think one of the conversations we're going to have today is, what does it look like to start your own business and then to purchase a business, acquire a business, merge your ideas with somebody else's ideas that are already kind of in play, right, with team members. And then how do you kind of enmesh all of that to synthesize it, to be able to move forward with something that's even new and better and different than either of the individual pieces and parts. But to do that fairly, I would love to go back and tell us a little bit about when you started your workroom, who you served, what you did, so that we can kind of understand. I understand you were outgrowing your space. That I think that, so no matter how much space we have, most of us outgrow our space. It's Parkinson's law. We expand or contract to the space we have. So tell us what the business was like when you started it, and, you know, the trajectory of getting to the point that you knew that, like you said, I've got to move out. It's too big.
Okay, sure. So it started like many in a one room in my home, and then put it in a different room in my home as it got a little bit bigger. And then we renovated our basement. So I had probably triple the space that I was currently working in. Like yourself and many others, it was for friends and neighbors, was really the clientele that I had. And then a friend of mine opened a yarn shop called the Stitch House. And she also had a sewing educational component to it, and asked if I'd be willing to teach, basic Roman shade fabrication evenings. And so I said, oh, I'd love to do that. So once I started to do that, oddly enough, they had an interior designer call looking to have someone turn a king-sized duvet into a queen-size throw. And they gave her my number. And that was when I started working for an interior designer. And I said, oh, I like this because it's so time consuming with the fabric selection and the design. And although I love those components at the time, I liked the fabrication part better.
Right.
So then, she told a designer, and then she had some interns and they left and they worked for somebody else. So that's really how the design business grew. I didn't become just strictly to the trade until I purchased Designer Draperies in 2014. But it started, like I said, like everyone else, friends, family. Then I got into the interior designers, and that quickly catapulted to a following. And that's what generated the moving downstairs to the basement. I hired one person, 3 days a week to help me with cutting and, the things that make two-handed items move faster. And then it just became evident that the work was still growing, and it wasn't enough space for two people to work in functionally from my point of view. So I just started to look for space just to get out of my house. My youngest was 8 by now, and it just felt like a good time that I could do that. So that's kind of how that all came about.
It's funny. I remember starting, I've told this story before, so that my story. So when you say like you and many others, I started in the sitting room of our master bedroom. And I'll never forget my husband saying, Michelle, I don't think that you're still sewing in our bedroom. I think we're sleeping in your workroom. And I was like, yeah, it does. It takes over everything. So I was, at that point, I'm still in the floor making drapery laying things out because I don't have room. I don't have this big table. And I just remember him like, Michelle, we're having to move these things off of our bed so that we can go to bed at night. Like, I'm afraid to get up in the middle of the night. I don't know where to step. Like, I'm going to step on a needle or something. So we did the same thing. We built out our basement, and I moved down there, and then I started taking over one room and taking over the next room because it just expands. You've got your finished goods, and you've got your, the work in progress. And it was so interesting because when our team sold CHF Academy back in 2012, had I not been going through all of my health crisis, one of the conversations that we had been having was to come back into my home. And we were going to actually floor our family room. So our family room is 20 something feet high. It's the big 2-story open rooms. And a lot of our neighbors have gone in, put in a steel beam, and put in 2 more rooms up there and a bathroom and laundry. I mean, it's huge space. And we were talking about that would be an even bigger footprint of the basement. We could convert our basement back to family living space and just move everything upstairs. And then, of course, I had my health issues and couldn't lift the bolts of fabric, couldn't do that anymore. But we're always in search of more space, because here's the thing: I want workrooms to know that we hear and see, but I would love for designers to hear and see this on their side too, because of how it impacts them. we can only, when you're making things with your hands, even when there is technology involved, you know, I know you've got some new fun gadgets in the workroom, but even when we have cutters and even when we have light inspection machines and vertical tablers and all the big pieces of machinery, there is still manual labor that goes in to what you do. And you can only do so much so fast. Like there, I remember, you know, I was all about timing, and I can remember, Julie, timing like one hand sewn side hem of a panel, because the designers that I worked with, we were, you know, mohair and velvet and linen, and running those things through machines could cause distortion, or it took me longer to fix the machine to be able to handle each individual thing. So they just asked for a lot of hand hemming. And that was fine. I did it. And I could do a 96-inch panel in 12 minutes. Like I knew what it took me. Now that's with my head down and just getting into the rhythm, right? But that meant that I couldn't do anything else for those 12 minutes. And if it was black outlined, it was going to take longer. It just took what it took. I couldn't speed that up. I couldn't make it any faster. I had already gotten as fast as I could get. I'd already pre-threaded all the needles. In other words, I had set up to be as efficient as I could be, but time still had to be taken. So when you have a space that you're outgrowing and you've already maximized your efficiencies in your processes, you really don't have an option other than to get a bigger space and to be able to bring in more people to get more done. The same holds true for upholstery, or push out due dates and it take longer to produce product. Like that's really all you can do. And I'm assuming that's kind of exactly where you got to.
Correct. And with that, I'd say too, that when I purchased the business, I didn't necessarily expect it to grow the way that it did. It wasn't like I was out pounding the pavement and, you know, advertising at that point and trying to bring in new designers. It just kind of organically grew. And so there are a lot of decisions that need to be made. Either you're going to turn away business, which, you know,
nobody wants
to do it as a small business owner, especially with the type of business that we do. When you're working for the trade, you're at the mercy of the ebb and flow of the project. You know, from construction to when we get in, it could be a year and a half. So it forces the hands to make some decisions. It's funny when you're talking about the hand sewing of a panel. I used to hand sew everything because I didn't have a blind hemmer, and I would save that to do in the living room with my family at the end of the day so that I could spend time with them, because there weren't enough hours in the day. And it's not the most efficient way. The most efficient way is having it out flat on a table and doing it. But I made the decision, okay, I'm going to save all my side hems so that I can sit in front of the TV with the kids, you know, for an hour and a half at the end of the day to do it. So just decisions like that.
That brings back a memory for me. I had not thought about this in years, but I had like a drafting table, and a drafting chair, so that I could have it low to have at my sewing machine, but I could pull it out and raise it all the way up to sit at my table. So I didn't have to stand, because I've got concrete floors and my back would be killing me. It didn't matter how much cushion I had on the floor. You can only stand on that concrete in one space for so long. And I would turn on, I wish we had podcasts back then. We didn't have podcasts back then, but I had a TV with a VHS, right? You put your VHS in there and I would watch, Runaway Bride, some Julia Roberts, something silly while I'm sewing. And so that I didn't have to, I knew what was happening. But what I brought upstairs to sew in my lap was hand trim on pillows, because back then we trimmed everything. In the 90s, in the 2000s, we were trimming the world. If you sat still, we were going to trim you, right? And I don't mean one, I mean multiple intricate trims. And so I'm sitting there because that was something that I felt like I could hold in my lap, right? But yeah, gosh, I had totally forgotten about that. But you get to the point where you're like, if we're going to be able to even make the money we need to make, we got to get out of here, because especially when you're confined to one or two rooms, it's you can't churn work out enough. You can't and do the level of work that we want to do. There's a different level of a panel now that you make than probably the one you made in your lap, even if it was beautiful and wonderful. You're just working with a different end goal in mind. And the end goal in this is to turn out a beautiful product, to have a business that can be efficient, that can show up when we tell the designers the work's going to be ready, and then to make money and pay your people well. I mean, I know that's ultimately the goal for everybody most everybody that's in business. All my listeners, that's their goal, is to do it well and to do it right and to do it with integrity. So you got to the point that you're like, all right, got to get out. I think you said a minute ago, you started your hunt by just looking for a place to go. That was the first idea, right? Is not, let me go run out and buy this huge business, but let me go find space.
Yes. My husband and I started looking locally for some commercial space, and not really knowing, anything about it, anything about the pricing or anything about, what kind of square footage do you need? And at the same time, the one employee that I had was approached by somebody in her community, just asking her what she was doing. She shared that she was working for somebody that owned a drapery workroom. He said, do I have an opportunity for you? Because one of his clients had a workroom less than 2 miles from where I live. And she was preparing to retire and was looking to sell the business. So she said, not interested, but I have somebody that might be. And so that was August of 2013. She came back, told me, got Judy's name and number. I reached out to her immediately and we started the conversation then. So it went from, purchasing property to expand my own business. And then it kind of went to the exploration of, or am I going to purchase a business that's already established, that's in rented space? So lots of back and forth of what was a good fit.
So that's a lot of different variables, right? You're talking about a purchase of a building and of course the land that it's on, and then building it out, right? With your one, at that time, with your one employee, I'm assuming. Or over here, we're not going to own necessarily the building and the land, but we're going to own everything that's inside of it, and it's already set up and outfitted. Oh, and by the way, you're going to get in a team. And oh, by the way, there are already designers that are coming in. So now, instead of more of a slow build and all of that, but it's all yours, you're going to own the majority of it except for the building, but it's coming fast and it's coming on day one. Yeah,
Yes,
that's a lot.
That is.
It's not an apple, orange, right? It is a different evaluation between those things. It really, I would think, Julie, that it must have made you stop and go, okay, what is it that I really do want here? Is this just an investment, or is this really a career that I'm building in this moment?
True. And when I think back to it, I feel like I didn't put a whole lot of thought into that. I just, Judy had me come to the space after hours one day because obviously she didn't want her staff to know what was happening. And I walked in and it just felt right. I could see myself there. I was excited by the space. I was excited by the projects that they had hanging up. I don't know, it just really felt right. And part of it too was I just kept saying to myself, how random, right? I mean, people aren't knocking down doors to purchase drapery workrooms. They're not. And I think that I don't know if anyone's done any research on this, on how many businesses actually get sold versus how many businesses close their doors and sell their assets. But it just felt right when I got into the space. And once I met Judy in person, I realized that I had met her one time before at a local WCAA meeting. She had accompanied our Rollies rep at our local chapter meeting. And, I remember going up to her and introducing myself and saying, oh, my business is 2 miles from yours, but she just was not interested in in any chit chat or, but it was funny because as soon as I saw her, I remembered our interaction. And that was part of why I bought the business, because Judy's personality was so different than mine. And so, and we could talk about the logistical part of having the business evaluated and all that, but I was like, okay, if I'm going to keep everything that she's doing, fabrication methods, head rails, everything, quality of linings, and if I'm going to keep all of that, and I know what my personality is versus hers, it just seemed like, okay, I think there's potential for success here.
So what was it like to have it valued? And since that was probably number one, it wasn't what you were looking for. So I love that it was 2 miles from your home and connection. And that also just goes to remind us there are so many underground workrooms. I don't even know how to say it. Somebody asked me the other day, how many workrooms are up in your area? And I'm like, I don't know all of them anymore, because people just start workrooms. I mean, it's kind of like asking how many designers. There are plenty of designers that aren't just all in a building, right? They are in their homes. They're working out of personal spaces. But 2 miles from your home, that would have to get my attention. How did you then enter into, I would love to hear just a little bit about what the valuation, because really they say at the end of the day, the value is what both people can agree to. But what was that process like to get to the close? And how long did that take you, Julie, from the time that you went in and did your first visit to the time that you guys agreed on the sale?
1 year. So I reached out to her in August of 2013, and I signed on the dotted line on August 1st of 2014. So yes, I didn't jump into it quickly. First off, Judy wasn't prepared to sell the business. Like, she had been speaking with her lawyer about the potential of it. So she hadn't done anything, she didn't even really know what she wanted to sell it for. Let's put it that way. So that piece of it took a little bit for her to be able to generate that. But what it looked like was I immediately reached out to my CPA and said, what do we need in order to find out if a business is viable to buy or not? So, he wanted 10 years, if possible, of her books. And all of her books were pen and paper. So that process took a long time. Couldn't generate, reports as easily. So had to do a lot of calculations to see. And so after he drudged through all of that, he said, this looks like a pretty good, her cost of goods are low, her expenses are low compared to, what she's bringing in. She had 3 full-time employees and herself. She was taking a salary for herself, which I wasn't doing. So I was thrilled at the concept of that being a possibility maybe not from the get-go, because I knew there'd be some buyout components to it. Like, I wasn't really sure how we were going to go about it. So then after some time, and I can't remember, it might've been 2 months or so, she came up with a price, and her price was based on her highest year of sales. Like, that was the number that she was looking for. And so I really don't know anything about that at that point. So my CPA was very critical with me through the whole process. And he's just like, that's really not what the business is worth. And now I obviously know that. So we did a little bit of negotiating and came to a figure that my CPA, after crunching all the numbers and explaining to me what I was willing to listen to at that point, I just wanted him to tell me the answer versus understanding it all. And so he just said, I think we could offer this figure. Let's see if she'll hold the note. I think you could pay her off. You put a 20% down if she's willing to hold the note, and then you'd be able to pay her off in 5 years at, such and such interest.
Right.
So I presented her with that, and she thought that was great. It was $250,000 less than her original offer, but I had explained to her, as my CPA had, and every year wasn't like that. She took her highest year. I mean, good for her. She was like, I'm going to try to get the most that I can. But then when we rationally spoke through it and I gave her the reasons why, and I just reiterated the fact, I just said, listen, Judy, that again, I'm going to repeat myself. there aren't people knocking down doors to buy drapery workrooms, as you know. And I think we were put into contact from some higher power, honestly. And I said, I think it's going to benefit you. I think it's going to benefit me. So she loved that idea. The trouble came when we sat down for the first time with her lawyer. So when our teams got together, because her lawyer then really not understanding our industry, maybe not taking the time to understand our industry and the market, was giving her poor advice and changed everything that she and I had agreed upon. And so I walked away. I said, this isn't what we agreed upon. And her lawyer said, well, just because the two of you agreed upon it didn't mean that that was going to be the terms. And I said, well, last time I checked, she was the owner of her own business. So I just said, I'm not agreeing to this. And I left. We left the meeting, said, Judy, I'm sorry, it didn't work out. You know, so she called me like 3 weeks later and
That
said,
had to be so hard. That's,
yes,
I mean,
for
to
me
get
or for
that-
her or for both of
for
us.
both of you.
Yes.
For everybody. Well,
Yes.
the lawyer might not
Yes.
have cared, but for both of you to get that far and to have an agreement going into it and then to get into it and to find the agreement change. Look, I just want to pause for a minute and say this. Understanding the industry that you're in is so important, right? Not every industry is valued the same way. Not in every industry has growth years and maybe backwards years. Like it's just not the same. And so this is why we always talk about the importance of working with bookkeepers and accountants and attorneys and people who are willing to know and understand the industry that you're in, not just generalized information or, you know, pricing a workroom versus pricing a tech company, not even close. So it's sad that she had professionals that didn't perhaps understand the industry at the same level that could have been needed to make that a beneficial transaction, even if there were small tweaks, but it didn't have to be like a rewrite. And I just feel like both of you probably felt so defeated when you walked away that day.
Oh, for sure. And I think that, I mean, I'm hoping she had the conversation with her attorney before we sat down. So she wasn't as blindsided as I was. And we were probably 7 months in at this point. And so, but I knew, I just said to her, you're missing a great opportunity. I said, I will go out and I might not buy someone else's business, but I am going to grow. I've made that decision. I'm going to go to a bigger space. And I just know that I will be successful. And you're missing an opportunity. You're turning 70. You want to retire. There aren't many workrooms that I'm aware of in this immediate area. I don't think she had it in her to explore and try to find people.
To start over again?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yes. And so that was unfortunate, but I'm really happy that I had the wherewithal to stand up and leave, because she called me 3 weeks later and I just said to her, she said, things went fine until we got the men involved. And I said, well, things went fine until we got your lawyer involved. And I just don't think that he had your best interest at heart or did enough exploration or investigation before he sat at this table to have a conversation. And I said, and that was detrimental to you. I said, because now my terms have changed. I'm not going to go back into the same agreement that we had. So I offered $100,000 less, no note. I was just going to pay her cash. And so he really robbed her of $100,000 plus collecting 7% interest over 5 years. And, but that's what I figured out. From the time that she and I left, I went to explore different financing just so I could leverage myself so that I knew, okay, I can do this if I try to do this option B.
Right.
Can I do it? Financially, can I do it? And so I figured out that I could with the help of my CPA and the understanding and partnership with my husband. If he wasn't behind me, I definitely couldn't have ventured into this, but realized, yes, let's do it. And then I also thought, it just might be nicer to not have her as a component for so long in it, 5 years into it too. There was that piece of it.
That's true. That's true.
I was so excited about buying it that I kind of just wanted to do it. But then after I had this very sobering event happen, it made me think a little bit clearer. And okay, Julie, what are you really willing to do or want to do? Because I didn't think it was going to happen. So it allowed me, it's just interesting because I thought it wasn't going to happen. It allowed me to think about what I really was willing to do or what was best for me. There was no desperation. Not that I was desperate, but you know what I mean? I was so excited about the potential.
Yes.
that I may have been doing this agreement that might not have been the most financially sound down the road for me.
It makes me think of going in to buy a car, right? And you're so excited and you can see yourself driving the car and you can see yourself sitting in it and so cute. And I've already figured out, where I'm going to put my purse and where my sunglasses are going to go. Like I've already figured it out. And then you get down to the table and something doesn't work out and you have to walk away. Granted, it's a different scope, but it's still that same feeling of you had already, or losing a home that you're trying to purchase. You've already put yourself in the position of this is mine and I belong here. And now all of a sudden you don't. So
right.
It
was very upsetting. No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It was very upsetting. I mean, the number of hours that my CPA and I had, gone through tearing this apart, like looking into this, that, or the other, having all the equipment appraised, just the emotional attachment I had already had. So it was very difficult. But I was so angry that day at this gentleman, her lawyer, because I'm like, who are you? Where have you been? Whatever. So I made her that offer.
I'm just sitting over here like cheering at the girl power. I have to cheer for that.
She accepted it. We made an appointment to meet. And so part of the agreement before I signed on the dotted line was that I was going to meet her staff. And at the time, 3 designers made up the bulk of her business, which really isn't the best business model. But the agreement was before I signed on the dotted line, I would meet the 3 employees and the 3 designers that made up, just so they'd put a face and say, I mean, and I don't know if I thought they would be very honest or what, but I just wanted to feel what the chemistry was like and to see if they were like, it's really Judy that we're invested in, not Designer Draperies of Boston. So that component took a little bit of time, and it was very difficult with the staff too. It was a mother, daughter, and then another woman. And what I didn't realize, because they weren't forthcoming with me when we had our initial interview, was that they had been interested in buying the business, and Judy had already gone through this exercise with them, with their attorney, with her attorney. They didn't tell me that during this meeting. I don't know why. Maybe they were afraid of that I wasn't going to keep them, or I don't know what their thought process was, but they didn't share any of that with me. So that's topic for after a little bit long, after we get through this piece of it. So anyway, so I had to do that, and I met the designers, and so they were happy for Judy that she was moving on, and I said, we're going to keep the same everything. I'm not changing anything right now, and so they were happy. So that all worked out. But so then it came to our appointment on August 1st to sign the papers, and her lawyer comes with an addendum to the agreement that Judy wasn't even aware of. And it was that the agreement was that I was going to pay her full time for 6 months. The first 3 months, she needed to come and work 40 hours a week. The first 3 months, 40 hours a week, and I would pay her. The next 3 months would be at my discretion of how often I would have her on site. But she would get paid her rate. After I paid her whatever, I would pay her salary. This was the agreement she and I had. She would stay on for 6 months. I needed her. She had all these projects in process. I had no idea what was going on. None of her staff were behind the scenes. They just fabricated. So I needed her to stay to get me through that. And that was great. So the addendum from her lawyer was that if I ever had to call her within that second 3 months or anytime after that, I had to pay her $100 an hour, minimum of 3 hours for me to just pick up the phone and call her. And so I just looked at her and him and I said, this isn't the Boston Police Union here. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I just looked at Judy and said, Judy, this is it. Like, I am not agreeing to this. We both reviewed our terms. The package was delivered to us 2 days ago. We reviewed it. We agreed to it. And now your lawyer is coming with an addendum. And it was just crazy. It was like he was feeling defeated because he didn't get the initial deal.
Ask.
And I just looked at him straight in the eye and said, you are risking her getting this opportunity. Do you understand that? I said, because I, again, will stand up and walk away. So Judy said, Charlie, tear up the addendum. Julie, I'm sorry. I knew nothing about it. And I said, okay. But it's just so funny.
All right. So one of the big things that I'm also hearing out of that, Julie, is we have to have a voice. When we own our company, we have to have a voice for the company, and we have to be able to know what we want, what we don't want, what we're willing to take, what we're not willing to take, and then stand up for it. Because I can imagine, granted, you're a strong woman, you're in Boston, you've had to stand up for yourself more than once. Like we that's a given, right? Mm-hmm. But there is something different about sitting down at those type of tables where you're trying to work it out. Like, you're really trying to make this work. And in those moments, being willing to say what you want and what you don't want. I know I've worked with a lot of women who have either bought buildings, they've gone out on their own, they've rented spaces, they've had to go into those commercial negotiations. I've bought and sold a company myself, worked with others who've done that. And it is a lot of, there is definitely negotiation, but knowing how far you're really willing to go is so important. So it's so awesome to hear where you found your voice. And honestly, we're at the end, Judy found hers too, to say that's enough. We're moving forward. Okay, so you buy it, you sign it on that day, and then you start moving in. What were some of the things that you noticed at the very beginning that worked really well when you came in?
Their installations went really well because I did accompany Judy on some installations and measures again before I purchased the business. Their installations ran well, but they did them all themselves. Like, she would shut down the workroom and all of her staff left the workroom and they would install. And by well, I just mean that the system that they had of who was laying things out, who was opening things, and all of that went very smoothly. And Judy had a very engineering brain. So, hardware was coming within 1/8 of an inch of where it should have to be. And it was always usually spot on. So I knew that was great. And I was really excited to learn those skills from her within, those 3 to 6 months that she was going to be staying. I'm trying to think of what else worked well. She was very hands-on in the workroom. And again, I think her volume at that time allowed her to do that. So she always touched the fabric. She wrote all the work orders, obviously, but she always touched the fabric, the trims before she wrote them, which at the time I was like, well, yes, I do that, but I wasn't writing any work orders. So that to me was like, oh, this whole work order world, that was a huge learning curve for me because everything that was in my head, I then needed to learn how to put it on paper to communicate to other individuals what I'm thinking. And I'll be honest, 9 years later, I still struggle with it sometimes. But the whole work order process, and then her manager, Fanny, who's still with me, Judy put a date on the calendar and that's the install date. And Judy never had to worry about whether it was going to be done or not. It was just always done. So those were the things that worked well there.
I remember I'm pretty sure you called me back during that time and we talked a little bit high level about buying. But I remember you making a comment to me somewhere over these years, because of course we've stayed in touch and run into each other at events. You kind of came into this, and I'm sure there were one or two things that needed to be adjusted quickly. But for the most part, your first thought was, this is running well. This is making money. This is paying the owner. I'm going to come in and take a posture of learning during this time for a year or more, and really learn what is happening instead of coming in to make it Julie's way. And I want to tell you how awesome I thought that was, and still think that that is. Number one, because I think it goes a long way with team members who are already there. You're not coming in saying, I don't like this, or this is bad, or this is wrong. It gives you a chance to understand. It makes me think about that statement that says, seek first to understand, then be understood. You didn't buy the business, from my recollection, and walk in to be understood. I am now Julie and I own this company and here's what we're doing. You walked in to say, hi, I'm Julie. I'm part of the team. Help me understand what you do and how you do it. Where are our areas for improvement, and what are we doing really well here? Tell me about, just in your mind, how it felt. And like you already knew, I'm going to be learning from Fanny, but also from Judy for these next few months. Like you said, Fanny is like a machine. Like she does beautiful, exquisite work. And then you've got Judy, who's got these processes set up that you're admiring and you need to understand. What was it like to come in, and for how long did you try to take the, I am here to understand and to learn before I start making bigger changes? I'm certain small changes, but the bigger changes.
Sure. Well, I just had the mindset of, what am I buying? The risk was huge, right? The risk that the staff could leave, the risk that the designers could leave. So I knew, I think about, I had a favorite restaurant in our neighborhood, and my husband, we could walk there. We'd go there all the time. They sold it. The new owners changed everything. They came in, gave it a facelift, changed the dishes, changed the menu, and it was terrible. And I thought to myself, why would you buy a thriving business with a steady clientele and then change it? Because guess what? We don't go there anymore, because what we liked and what drew people there changed. So I had that in my brain. And so when I bought it, first of all, I was kind of at the mercy of these people, to be honest with you, because I didn't know their systems, and I wasn't, and will never be, as skilled of a seamstress as Fanny was or is. And I knew let's say I just knew my place. However, I will say, I think I knew my place a little too long. And that became detrimental to employees that I had hired, because I was letting things occur in the workroom that shouldn't have, because I was afraid of losing Fanny, to be honest with you. But I will say that I had the wherewithal to know that if I wanted to keep the designers, we needed to keep everything the same. So I just didn't want to rock the boat. I wanted all the fabrication to stay, as I wanted the employees to stay, because I had said to them, that's my intention. And so I think I just knew what needed to be done. And what's interesting is, the employee that came with me, she was a business owner herself before she came to work for me. She owned a coffee shop and sold it. She didn't enjoy, I think, the different pace of it. And when she and I would be together, it would be very social. And that wasn't, the women that worked at Designer Draperies, it was all about production. There wasn't a ton of chit chat. And then she and Fanny kind of rubbed each other the wrong way, let's say. And she came to me and said, I can't work here anymore. But she looked at me and said, but you need Fanny, like you need her. So I know that as a business owner. So no hard feelings. This just isn't the environment that I want to be in right now, because I miss talking to you. I miss seeing you. I miss all of that. And it's not what I signed up for.
Her restaurant changed. Her restaurant changed.
It did.
right?
Yes.
And that's okay. And that happens.
Yes.
I was going to ask
Correct.
you how it was to integrate staff, because that's a hard thing. I mean, it's difficult when you purchase and then you come in and you see things. I think it is really hard to come in and see things and not want to, in some ways, change some things quickly. And you can't understand it all at once. I know even when we came in at CHF, number one, we couldn't change everything all at once. We didn't need to change everything all at once. So it wasn't just but we had to start looking at where is the business now? The same thing that we have to think of in our own individual business. Where is the business now? Where are we trying to go? What's working to get us there? What's not working? And what's the most glaring? Like, what's the biggest problem that we have? And usually that's where we're going to focus. So I know that you probably sat back a little bit longer than maybe in retrospect you would like to do again. As you have gone through the process of owning your own small company, certainly a little bit more on the relaxed side and then moving more into a production driven company through that purchase, what would you say if you had to do it over again, you would do differently? Would you have still done what you did, or what would you have done differently?
I think what I would have done, first of all, and we're still muddling through it, is they didn't have any policies and procedures written down. So again, that's why I was at their mercy. There wasn't a binder that had, this is how we fabricate this, this is how we fabricate that. And I promised the designers we're going to keep the same fabrication methods. And so we are still working through getting all of those documented. So I would have made that a priority at the beginning. Secondly, I had used QuickBooks in my old business. Judy hadn't. So I had to create QuickBooks in this new business. And I didn't take the time that I should have to set QuickBooks up correctly with bundles and all of that. So, and then to play catch up on that, that's just been kind of a logistical nightmare as well. So those are two main things that I wished I had done. What I will say is that the business has tripled in size since I bought it. And as you can imagine, with that growth, so I was really at the mercy of the staff that I had, because I was trying to keep up with the measuring and all the things. At the time, I was checking all the fabric in. I was writing all the work orders, doing all the estimates, going on all the measures. Not a whole lot of that's changed, but what has changed is now I have administrative help where I didn't have that before. So I wished I had reached out to somebody at some point, waved my white flag and said, I need help in figuring out how to deal with business growth, because I really didn't. I want to say we probably had 3 levels of it. After the second level, I reached out to a larger workroom in our area, a very successful one. And oddly enough, he's a man, and there are 3 other women run workrooms at that level. And I just knew they wouldn't sit with me and talk to me. And so I chose Elliot, and he was very gracious. We went to lunch, we talked over things. He introduced me to using an iPad because I had individual paper folders for every client. And he said it was a game changer for him, and it was such a game changer. So now I use an iPad and GoodNotes, and I have every designer and every designer's project in one location on site. I don't have to wait till I get back. So just little things like that. But growth is difficult. If you don't have a firm foundation, and then you go through this exponential growth, like I was on a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And still, because you coach me, I'm still kind of feeling that way because the business is still growing. We had COVID, and it was like even busier than we'd ever been, but with its own limitations. And so I can't stress enough, like how having policies and procedures documented, not only for the staff, but for me as the new owner, I was kind of in no man's land and at the mercy of these people, because I had this business that I have loans for, and I needed to run smoothly. And So I turned a
Nothing's
blind eye
written
to some
down.
things. Yes, right.
It
And
makes
so I
me
turned
think,
a blind eye to things.
that's right. It makes me think of, when you say these two things, I would call it policies, procedures, terms, conditions, and standard operating procedures. So all of that is probably encompassed in what you're talking
Yes.
about, because not only how do we make these particular items, like what is our standard for it to go out the door? How do we work with our clients? And then how do we manage time and people within the company? There's so many layers to that. And then you look at the process of money management. Pen and paper was, listen, pen and paper, whether it was for a client measurements or whether it was for financials, it's only going to get you so far. And it was not going to support the work of the business that you had purchased. And so, I mean, even your smaller business had been using QuickBooks. And then you move into a much larger business that's pen and paper. I still talk to clients and to people all the time that are using pen and paper, and I get it, or they're using Excel to run all of their financials. I get it. I did it too for a couple of years until I realized that, like you said, I could not get reports. I could not see where I was. I couldn't understand the impact or the cash flow or any of those things, what was truly happening with
At a
even
glance.
if at a glance, even if I was keeping up with those details to hand off to my accountant in a year, they were not helping me manage the day-to-day of what I was doing. I mean, that's the whole reason that we've even built Metrique. It's to take all of that data and to be able to put it in one place to look at it, because there is knowledge and power in looking at those things. So I commend you, even if not organized the way that you would have loved it. I just commend you for at least moving it from pen and paper into a technology-based system that could support you. And I think that I was thinking, I told a couple of clients yesterday, we were talking about growth. And I said, from what I've seen, most businesses, we start off I would say, maybe simply, we're going to do A, B, C, and X, Y, Z. We might start it accidentally. We might start it in our home. We might even start it in a space, but we start and we don't really know who we are and what we're doing. We have an idea of what we want to do, but we don't really know who we are in it. Do you know what I mean? And so as we are doing the work, we're realizing this is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is what works for me. This is what doesn't work for me. So then we go through this next level of evolution where we start cutting out the things that don't work for us and focusing on the things that do. Then we start scaling that, and it starts this bigger, 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 bigger. But then the challenge becomes doing it and keeping the same level of product and service as we are expanding, right? And making sure that we're expanding with what we love and that we didn't expand at level one when we don't even know who we are and what we're doing. And then we kind of get into this refining process, right? We get into this, all right, if you even think about it with the business hierarchy of needs that have been defined in Fix This Next, it starts with sales and then profit and then order. So if you think about where you were, you have to focus on the sales to keep the business running. So when you bought the business, the first thing you did was say, we've got to continue with sales and profitability. And when you can focus on those, then you can move up and focus on order. And once you've focused on order, which is what you've been doing these last few years, right? And even continuing to do now, how do I take care of the people? How do I take care of the profits and the sales process and all the things? Then we can start looking at the next two layers, which is where I know that you and I will be moving in the next year or two, impact and legacy. How do we have an impact? And how do we go ahead and get Designer Draperies of Boston set up that when it's your time to sell this, you have the 10 years, you have the documentation, you know what to expect. You've been on one side, now you're going to be on the other side. How do we put your business in the best possible place so that that one blip year is actually 4 to 5 blip years? Then we can ask for the most that we want to ask for going into that. Is that kind of the way that you see it?
Yes, you hit it. Yes, you hit it right on the head. Even something as simple as, we use Airtable now as a project management tool because, at the beginning, I just knew when every single Lundy's order came through the door or whatever. But, now it's impossible to keep up with it. Once it got to a certain level, it's impossible to keep up with it. And then it's, instead of us saying, hey, is this here? Is that here? And even even now, even though we've been using it, I want to say we've been using it for probably a year and a half now, I still find ourselves asking, oh, did such and such arrive? And then now we're stopping ourselves and saying, no, I'm going to look, I'll look on Airtable because, but that is exactly how it is for sure. Yes.
It's funny. I remember thinking to myself, I will always remember every fabric in the project that I used it on. And I had a workroom for 16 years, and I can still go downstairs to my workroom and see, like, you know, a remnant of fabric. And I'm looking and I'm like, I don't ever remember using that fabric,
Yes.
but I clearly did because it's in my workroom and it's not in my house. So I must have done that, but I don't ever remember doing it because it grows and it builds and you just cannot keep up with all of it.
For sure. And up until 2 years ago, my staff will tell you I could look at a fabric and say exactly what designer, what job, what room, but not anymore.
Not anymore.
I can't. Not anymore.
So,
Yes.
Julie, if you were to leave us with, let's say, a word of advice or a word of encouragement for somebody looking to buy a business, right? Or to protect themselves, or, you know, here's some things to think about before you go into that. What would you say?
I would say really look into what the business has for documented procedures, all of that. The other thing that I'm running into too is, and you know this, is, you know, what's in place for your staff, human resource wise. You know, as a small business, we don't have to have certain things. But as you get over, you know, even if you have 3 employees, I think it's important to make sure that you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing. And even if it's not what you're supposed to be doing, what other things could I do to make this a better place to work, or somebody want to stay here, or somebody to want to work here? Because what I will say, as we all know, there aren't many people that do what we do anymore. And the pool of prospective employees seems to be getting less and less as they've pulled away from any type of training in schools and whatnot. So I know that I've made a focus right now to how do I retain the employees? So I think see if those systems are in place, but the policies and the procedures and all of that documented so that you as the new owner can come in and have a reference to, so that you're not where I was, because I kind of was, you know, struggling there for a bit, fearful for a bit. And there's enough anxiety and fear in purchasing a business anyway, that I wouldn't want anyone to have the fear of, oh, I can't upset this apple cart because if that person leaves, I'm in trouble. Yes.
Yeah. One of the things I'll say from the side of buying, because I've been on both, and you will be on the other side at some point, but you've been on the side where you needed what the buyer or what the seller was putting together. So if you're looking to sell your business, here are some things you can take away from the discussion that we've had today. And then, Julie, if you see if anything I missed, feel free to throw it in there. Documentation, right? Make sure that you're clear on what you're actually selling. Like, are you selling the name? Are you selling the phone number? Are you selling a website? Are you selling the employees? Like, you know, just what is it that you have for sale? I think.
Can I interrupt you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I want to say that there is a difference. So, I did an asset purchase versus a stock purchase because I didn't know any of this. But as I was told, is that if I bought it as a stock purchase, then any of Judy's baggage would have then been my responsibility. So it was advised to me that I purchased it as an asset purchase. So, and then I had to change the name. She was Designer Draperies of Boston, Inc. And so when I bought it, I couldn't use that name. So I'm JM Custom Design, Inc., but we're doing business as Designer Draperies of Boston because what did I buy? I bought the name and the reputation. So that's an important thing to know when just what you're saying. Yes.
No, that's really good. So being very clear on what is being sold, being clear on how you're going to value it. There are multiple ways to value a business. So making sure that you have the ability to get 10 years of financials. I think it's also huge. And I know that the other companies, I worked with a couple of people for probably 2 or 3 years to get their business ready to sell, because you don't usually just walk up one day and think you're going to sell it. And one of the big pieces of being able to sell the business was to show that the owner took a salary, right? So that any additional profit in the company was after the owner had a salary. That shows up really, really well. And then document. The more you have to document, the more you keep up with your financials, the more you show that you're able to be paid, and that the beautiful thing is if you can show that growth, right? That continual growth year over year over year, even at 10%, it doesn't have to be huge, just showing that there's growth potential. So that's just some good things, really quick to get in mind as you get ready to buy or sell.
The other thing I want to say is, like, I feel like I'm moving towards, I need to do this for about 10 more years just because of the financial commitments that I have with my, I have 4 children, 2 left in college. Actually, one's going to enter college, my youngest, next year. So I've committed to 10 more years of this, whether I'll be ready to pack up in 10 years or not, but I know I have to do it for 10 more years. But what I will say is I find myself now leaning towards what you were just talking about is, what needs to be done so that it's not Julie Murphy running the business. So I think it's really important as the owner to recognize that if you're doing 80% of the work, and then that's the business. So you really need to focus on making sure that the business can be run without you. Yeah. And so I'm working my way through that.
Impact and legacy. Yes. That's exactly what they're doing. That management. That's right. Yes.
Anyway, that's my last.
No, that's perfect. Bit. Well, tell people where they can find you. Where are you hanging out on social media?
Sure. So I'm mostly on Instagram, Designer Draperies of Boston on Instagram. I'm not that great at Instagram. I need to, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but we're there. You'll see us. Yes. We're on Facebook as well. And designerdraperiesofboston.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all of that in the show notes so that they can see it. And thank you for just sharing, like, so transparently what that process looked like. I think there's so many big moments and so many big feelings, and sometimes it gets glossed over and it's, oh yeah, we had a great purchase, or, oh yeah, we had a bad purchase. But this is a year, and there are ups and there are downs, and there's highs and there's lows. And just thank you for taking us on that journey and then showing us the wisdom that you've gained through that process. I really appreciate it.
Sure. And please know that I am so willing to help or speak to anyone. If there's anybody that listens to this and they have questions or they're curious about anything, I would love to share. I'm, like you said, transparent. I would love to share anything to help somebody.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks, Michelle. You too. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Julie, thank you so much for joining today. It was such a pleasure to hear, and in some cases, like, astounding that you were able to get through that entire process and feel so good about it on the other side. Just thank you for that wisdom. If you are questioning what to do if you want to buy a company, please reach out to Julie. And for those of you that are looking to organize and edit and pull your businesses together, not just to buy it or to sell it, but to actually enjoy the benefit of a well-run business for yourself, reach out and let me help you. I would love to be able to do that. You can go to scarletthreadconsulting.com and click on the Work With Me page and then fill out an application for a discovery call. Let's work together to put your business together in a way that supports you, because having an organized business leads to profit, and profit doesn't happen by accident. Profit is a Choice is proud to be part of the designnetwork.org, where you can discover more design media reaching creative listeners. Thanks for listening, and stay creative and business minded.